things have evolved a lot since our last discussion. Myself, for example, I used to just record videos. Now we are live on a live platform, and I think the water industry also followed suit. It wasn't something normal to have video calls and conference calls. Has evolved a lot, and luckily after our discussion, we're back in the field, and you guys have been through many exhibitions, and you've interacted with many customers. And so what are the trends you're seeing now in the market?
Well, innovation. I mean, this new form of platform is another innovation we're bringing. I think that what has been very apparent in the last, I guess, 6 months is the water industry was very slow to think about sustainable development goals. And that has shifted dramatically. There's an awakening that the industry is responsible for a substantial proportion of the greenhouse gas emissions, and it's got to sharpen up its act. And that we would have certainly not talked about that 2 years ago.
So I think I agree with you. It's shifting at a very fast pace. But what are the barriers?
I think they're multiple. I think firstly, there's some good technologies out there, but they're a barrier which would help the industry achieve much lower carbon emissions and also move towards industrial entities and move towards the net zero water. But there are barriers to adoption. The first is I've got to recognize that engineers are very important gatekeepers, influencers to decisions that utilities are making. And unfortunately, those decisions they're making them today are going to lock us in for the next 20 years. And if we'd had this conversation about 2-3 months ago, I would have said, based on attending conferences, talking to engineers, it was not part of their remit to think about environmental impact of plant recommendations, that type of thing, design. But I was with engineers here in Phoenix yesterday, and that's changed totally. They are looking at that. The regulators as well. If you pick up an EPA guide to water treatment, there isn't one word mentioned of sustainability in terms of water treatment technologies. I met with the EPA a couple of weeks ago, and that's now firmly on the agenda. They've got someone who's dedicated to that. The last one is us, the vendors. We sell equipment and it's, buy and then bye-bye, we'll see you later. And a lot of the technologies out there have substantial lifetime cost impact that go way beyond the actual technology itself. And everyone should be looking at lifetime costs and their impact.
I like how you frame it, that if we're building a plant today, we're stuck with this plant for 20 years. You can improve a little bit, but conceptually, we cannot do much changes. So it's the technology we have to go with. So what can the industry do today to change this?
I break it down the immediate and then the sort of medium long term. There is scope to retrofit, and that can begin with real-time monitoring of performance. It's ironic. 12 years ago, we started selling online instrumentation, enabling utilities to reduce their energy use, chemical use, and indirectly waste and that type of thing. But the ROI was always that saving costs. And then when we sort of started thinking about it, I thought we've been doing helping them reduce carbon footprint way back. We just never labeled it as such. That's one thing, is just getting in far better control of their processes and optimizing them. The other thing is that there are technologies out there that can actually provide for resource recovery. So you can think of contaminants that are removed and then buried under a hill in Utah or wherever. Those things like selenium, hydrogen sulfide can be recovered and are valuable resources as opposed to just getting rid of them. Regulators have got to impose, and we're working with the California and state regulators, to understanding carbon footprint. It's got to be part of the evaluation. You can no longer just talk about how much per 1,000 gallons or liters of cost to treat water. You've got to think about the waste streams. With things like ion exchange have a huge tail in terms of their impact down on water quality in the environment. So, and scalable solutions, because there's a big equity thing here as well. The Sustainable Development Goals are all about equality of access to safe drinking water. And many of the technologies we see today, the traditional, are not scalable. They're great for big cities, great for big desalination plants here, there, and everywhere. But what about the millions who don't have access to safe drinking water because there aren't scalable solutions? Vendors have a responsibility to come up, innovators, to address those groups of people who are increasingly exposed to deteriorating water quality and availability. So those are the sort of things that the industry should be addressing in a very proactive way.
Yeah, I agree with you. In terms of vendors, I was talking last time to Genesis, for example, for the anti-scaling. So we're saying that why can't we ship a concentrated anti-scaling rather than shipping all the cost of shipping in terms of energy and emissions? So what is AMS doing to address these challenges?
Well, I just take that last one. So, when you think about that, the detergent industry did that, right? It moved away from great 5-liter jugs of detergent to pods.
Correct.
And the chemical industry is a very big player in the water industry, and it shifts vast amounts of chemicals around, and these are pretty noxious. You think about ferric chloride, ferrous sulfate, organosulfides, even ozone. These have a substantial carbon footprint attached to them. And in the case of ferric salts, they're actually basically scrap metal dissolved in waste industrial acid. And they're full of contaminants, and they're horrible to handle, and there are supply chain issues. So one of the things that we've done is develop on-site reagent generation. Everyone will be familiar with on-site chlorine generation to replace using chlorine, which is not a nice thing to be shipping around. And we've essentially adopted the same approach to replacing these nasty chemicals, which have a horrible footprint, with on-site generation of reagents using renewable energy, and totally scalable from the smallest community you could imagine all the way up to a large city. And we came at that because our roots were in monitoring, real-time monitoring, and we realized that these systems we were monitoring were costly, and they had all these consequences beyond just what they were doing. And so real-time monitoring remains a very important part of our portfolio, saving on energy use, chemical use across the board, and giving major savings to our end-use clients, both industrial, because sometimes we only think about municipal, as well as municipal clients.
Thank you, Rick. I like how you frame it. We talk about it, but as vendors, we can always find ways to help and reduce with our innovations and our product development.
The world is changing, and going back to the sort of barriers, one of the things we can do is put together monitoring and treatment, which enables us as a vendor to actually then offer a design, build, operate. And there we have to put our money where our mouth is. I don't think this sort of buy and then buy is a very good model. I know shareholders love it because you made a lot of money, but actually if we've got a bigger responsibility than just thank you very much and leave you with a problem. So if we run the system, and that brings private capital also into an industry that's strapped for cash, my investors love it because I've got a 25-year contract. And the client loves it because they don't have to go out and raise funds to buy a system. And the monitoring holds our feet to the fire, which is a responsibility we need to accept. We can't just walk away and pretend that it's somebody else's problem.
Correct. And you remind me of when we started the Salytics, we did a voice of customers in Africa. Two things came always consistently as top priorities for customers: product availability. And as you said, like chlorine and shipping all these chemicals can be quite challenging. So product availability and local support. So for them, they want somebody to be locally supporting them, reviewing what's happening, and working with them constantly. So that's why we went on a localized approach, having subsidiaries in every country.
So we're running a number of demonstrations of our technology, and it's all remotely monitored, which when you think about small communities which don't have trained people to run them, they don't have someone to go out there every 5 minutes and check a valve or whatever. Technology can really shift the paradigm, particularly for these communities. Scalable, but also the automation and remote control means that it's just so much more accessible. Whereas trying to run an ion exchange plant or some acid dosing system it doesn't happen.
Correct. And especially today with the supply chain challenges, and it's even making it work worse in terms of moving goods in places.
Yeah. The time is right. Now we've just got to educate the regulators, the engineers to think about things differently than they have in the past and play their role. Because if they're not specifying or approving, in the case of the regulator, or basically saying, no, that's not good the long-term lifetime costs, we won't approve that type of approach. They have a very important role. We can push, but we need someone on the other end pulling.
I think this will be the biggest challenge, because if somebody is used in a certain way, it's much easier to copy paste and do the same design and move forward.
And I get that. It's, I was talking to these engineers yesterday, and I said, so you select the trash before you throw it out, and recyclable, non-recyclable, organic. Oh, yeah. So when you last designed a plant, did you think about its carbon footprint and what you were condemning the world? Yeah. So they leave all that behind when they go to work, and somehow we've got to bring the two together through education and things like this.
Correct. I fully agree.